The New Galactic Era, Space Voyages. Science fiction novel by Obydenna. Chapter 5. General Gartt. The pilot turned away from the distant monitoring screens. The long hours of stillness lulled him into a quiet descent toward sleep. The last scientific expeditions had been successful. Despite significant technological advances, people from the solar system knew relatively little about the biological life of the universe and continued to explore the most remote regions of outer space. Space exploration has discovered new intelligent life in the Sagittarius constellation, also known as the Archer. To avoid succumbing to sleep entirely, Yart reached for his evening meal. Middle-aged, he admired fruits and vegetables. Yart had ordered his meal an hour ago and was looking forward to the most delicious peaches in the world. And for dessert, he ordered a baked apple. He rarely ordered it, but today, more than ever, he wanted to enjoy a delicious, sweet baked apple. The Age of Biocrits is a world of fruit without trees, vines, and bushes. This is a world where fruits and vegetables are printed on special printers. In addition, Yart ordered a fish delicacy, salmon. The production of plants, meat, and seafood from cells was the cutting edge of food technology of the new era. By growing food in laboratories or printing it with specialized printers, humanity began using fewer natural resources. Printing meat on a printer improved people's lives and simplified travel. Food grown in cells was an achievement that led to population growth in the urbanized centers of planets. The intergalactic ship was overcoming outer space. Suddenly, an inexplicable vibration passed through the hull. The pilot felt it too. Looking at the intergalactic radar, he saw nothing suspicious. Suddenly, a yellow signal light lit up in the cockpit, and a warning bell rang. General Gartt entered. He had just taken over the position of commander of the mission, since his predecessor had been transferred to the settlement on Saturn. Maybe it was a normal energy release when the engines accelerate. It happens when the engine overheats, reducing the shaking force. Or maybe it's... The co-pilot, Ken, said. Without saying a word, Gartt sat down at the console and switched the controls to manual. Entering a combination of numbers unknown to either Yart or Ken, Gartt changed the flight path. However, the ship continued to toss in place. A tremor ran through the ship. General Gartt looked carefully at the monitors. With many years of expedition experience, Gartt felt the devices showed inaccurate coordinates for space and time. White rays of light and sparks began to appear around the spaceship. The ship was approaching the center of the Sagittarius constellation, which had many areas with time vortices. Gartt was not surprised by what was happening. What processes were taking place in this stellar area were not known to the Earthlings. The situation was getting worse. The control panel records nothing. Where was the starship in some other dimension, or subspace? Perhaps in a spatial wormhole? Or perhaps moving outside the unknown matter? It was impossible to answer these questions, even hypothetically. The instructions for exiting intertemporal space were unclear, and the military engineers did not explain the processes at work. And what it was, a jump or movement in space or flight in other dimensions, was impossible to describe in scientific language. The state of uncertainty continues. From the old space pilots, General Gartt knew that spaceships sometimes entered and exited other dimensions. But he also knew that very little was known about these dimensions. Despite significant achievements and the development of new planets, exploration of other dimensions had reached a standstill. Different physics. Reality is also different. Reality shimmers like a dreamscape. Is there a hidden logic to the events that surround us? General Gartt kept silent. Sitting down at the console, Gartt entered a short combination of symbols again. An unusual splash appeared on the screen, which Ken and Yart had never seen before. Gartt continued to type unknown combinations of symbols. In a moment, the spaceship began to shake. It began to bounce in place. Despite its enormous size, the starship resembled an elastic rubber ball, blinking and bouncing off imaginary stone walls. Gartt looked at the surprised faces of Ken and Yart, but said nothing. Pressing the red button twice, he launched a program. A message appeared on the pilot's panel that the interstellar ship had begun zigzagging through space. The flight in this mysterious environment, outside the coordinates, lasted a long time. Ken could not communicate with the general because all sound signals disappeared in this space. It seemed that everything, even elementary particles, acted according to some other physical laws. In other words, Ken and Yart did not hear what General Gartt said and did not understand what Gartt was doing.
The monitors showed that Gartt had slowed the spacecraft by activating the high security mode. After a while, the engine's speed reached 0. The ship continued to sail in a vacuum. The general checked all the panels. A moment later, a message appeared on the screen signaling that the flight was going well. Everything was normal. Gartt re-entered the data, and the starship began moving in a new direction. In a short period, it gained enough energy to reach maximum speed. The monitors showed that the engines had switched to medium power, but the speed of the starship became colossal. The ship's hull began to crackle again, overcoming the energy field that, it seemed to the pilots, was sticking to it. For 5 Earth hours, the interstellar ship raced through the vacuum spaces of an unknown dimension, outside of time and space. The onboard computer, using complex algorithms to analyze the environment, calculated routes. Dozens of calculations were performed in seconds, enabling the ship to move through space. Gartt was in the cockpit and supervised everything. After another 2 hours, Yart felt that time and space around the spacecraft began to change. He removed the protective helmet that all pilots were required to wear in the event of unforeseen or emergency situations. "We'll have plenty of time before we cross the timeline and return to our usual coordinate system," he heard General Gartt's voice. "General," Ken said, "what happened? In my 5 Earth years as a pilot and training at a military facility on the planet Uranus, I've never heard of such things as happened with us." Gartt knew that spaceship pilots did not learn how to navigate in such space because there was no sufficient theoretical basis, and it was difficult to prove the existence of parallel worlds. Given the extremely complicated situation, Gartt decided to tell the pilots what had happened. "Speaking of other dimensions," the general began his story, "most often we are talking about such things as parallel worlds, alternative realities that exist parallel to ours, in which the world is arranged somewhat differently. Humanity is well aware of the 3 spatial dimensions that it encounters and in which it lives every day. They determine the length, height, and width of all objects in the universe. So it turns out that humanity lives in 3 spatial dimensions, forward-backward, left-right, and up-down, and 1 temporal dimension, past-future. In total, 4 dimensions exist. However, it is already known that there are additional dimensions beyond the 3 visible ones. According to the theory, the universe exists in different worlds." "Thank you, General. What dimension do you think we are in now?" Yart asked. "I can't say exactly how many dimensions exist. I think the world around us consists of incredibly small vibrating particles in a 10-dimensional space-time space. I can't say more." The flight in unknown space continued. To escape the grip of boredom, Yart asked Oz about Sagittarius. Oz slowly began the story. In the sky, Sagittarius represents a centaur, half man, half horse, with the torso of a man and the body and 4 legs of a horse. The lower halves of horses make centaurs well equipped to overcome rough mountainous terrain. This also gives them speed, making them unsurpassed big-game hunters. The centaur is depicted aiming an arrow into the heart of the neighboring constellation of Scorpio, represented by the red supergiant star Antares. Centaurs are known to have a talent for prophecy. They could see the future. Centaurs spent years trying to master the special art of divination. "Thank you, Oz," said Vert, looking at the intergalactic map. Space and time were still not precisely defined. In a laboratory on Jupiter, Yart studied the constellations and was well versed in intergalactic maps. He knew well that the constellation Sagittarius contains a large number of nebulae and star clusters, the richest stellar localities in the Milky Way. The very center of the Milky Way is in the direction of Sagittarius. Trying to remember all the details, Yart asked OZ to continue the story. In Sagittarius is an asterism called the Teapot, formed by a collection of stars: Caus Australis, Acela, Caus Meridionalis, Caus Borealis, Nunci, and Alnachtl. These bright stars indicate the lines of the teapot, the handle on the left, the spout on the right. Another asterism, consisting of 4 stars arranged in the form of a cross, is called Terebellum. Part of the classic picture, which is quite easy to see, is the bow of Sagittarius. The star representing the upper part of the bow is located at the top of the teapot, and the lower part of the bow is located at the bottom right of the teapot. The star located approximately midway between them symbolizes the bow's middle. The stars are known as the northern, middle, and southern bows. At the southern end of the arc is the brightest star in the constellation. This is a stellar giant, a star that has bloated as it approaches the end of its life. It is many times larger than the Sun and 400 times brighter. This makes the star quite easy to see, even though it is about 145 light-years away from the solar system. The other stars in Sagittarius are also giants. The one in the middle is actually the largest and most impressive of all. It is larger and brighter than the other giants. The imaginary pair above the teapot spout includes 2 nebulae that are giving birth to new star clusters, the Lagoon Nebula and the Trifid Nebula. The Lagoon has given birth to dozens of stars, and the process of formation is still ongoing. This star cluster appears as a hazy oval of light with a reddish-pink glow, the result of emission from young stars. Lanes of dark dust on the surface of the Trifid Nebula give it the appearance of 3 parts. The young star at the center of the nebula illuminates a significant part of the space around it and includes over 100 other stars. Sagittarius also contains several globular clusters of hundreds of thousands of stars. Exact coordinates? Need no more, Yart said. Standing up, he headed for the ship's engineering bay, where General Gartt and his partner Ken waited for him. While studying at a military facility on the planet Uranus, Yart knew that the minds of the Age of Biocrits had proven that the universe was a giant hologram, and each part contained information about the whole. Delving into the theory of the holographic universe, man began to question the nature of reality and the limits of human perception. The entire universe is understood as a 2-dimensional information structure, supposedly drawn on the cosmological horizon, with the 3 dimensions serving as a description of the macroscopic world. A distant 2-dimensional surface contains all the data needed to fully describe the world of beings on the planet Earth, and, like a hologram, this data is in 3 dimensions. The network of subatomic particles that make up the physical universe, the so-called framework of reality, seems to be an undeniable holographic feature. The holographic principle would comprehensively encompass reality as we know it, as well as previously unexplained phenomena such as the paranormal, out-of-body experiences, telepathy, lucid dreaming, and near-death experiences, among others. "So it's not known for sure what happened to us?" Yart asked General Gartt, entering the engineering compartment. "Yes, you are right. The facilities of the solar system continue their experiments in time and space, but there is not enough reliable data yet. I don't have enough information about other dimensions, but apparently the intergalactic hyperspace maps I saw weren't accurate and did not reflect the true proportions of space and time. Of course, that's not my expertise."
He looked at the intergalactic space framework. The intergalactic map depicted a transition to a speed greater than the speed of light, but the time it took for the interstellar ship to reach its destination seemed much longer to the pilots than it actually was. All this suggested that the starship had entered another space-time dimension. Now we have to wait for the ship to reach the required speed and exit the time vortex. That will take a long time.
General Gartt was an experienced solar system scientist and one of the oldest military men. During long flights, Gartt reminisces about his younger days and tells of incredible expeditions to distant galaxies and nebulae about which, even now, very little is known. To amuse the starship pilots a little and distract them from their heavy thoughts, Gartt recalled one of his first scientific explorations to the planet Yart in Sagittarius when he was a young laboratory scientist. Harry Gartt received his first military rank today. The expedition was to the planet, the first of the human colonies settled before the Age of Biocrits. "One day," said Gartt, immersed in memories, "to the central leadership of the solar system, a message came from the main council of the planet Yart about the spread of a disease unknown to this day and the rapid extinction of people. Its population was 3 times Earth's, but it never achieved significant scientific breakthroughs in medicine or other fields. The commander-in-chief of the planet Yart spoke about the amazing changes that had taken place on the planet and required the immediate intervention of scientists of the solar system. "The planet's population is losing its memory and going crazy," said the commander-in-chief. "Many sick, before their death, spoke of a false perception of reality, which made people see, hear, and feel things that did not exist on the planet. For the Yart people, the hallucinations became constant and were perceived as reality. They did not realize that they were hallucinating. Hallucinations were not a disease, but they were a sign of a serious problem on the planet. The settlement's leadership reported that the common types of hallucinations were auditory and visual. People heard and saw things that did not exist, talked about hallucinations of smells, sensations, and tastes that never existed on the planet. Maybe some chemical compounds or the planet's radioactivity influenced people," suggested Yart. "We considered it. I looked in the Intergalactic Encyclopedia and found an area of volcanoes with elevated radioactivity. We had to fly to this planet and find out everything on the spot. The intergalactic flight to the planet Yart took a long time," Gartt continued. Over the next few hours, Gartt told Yart and Ken that the planet Yart, which was an abbreviation of several words and meant settlement, was a special planet in its own and other galaxies. It was identical to Earth in the solar system. It was hard to believe, but the planet Yart had the same chemical composition as Earth, but was 5 times larger. The planet's atmosphere was a gas layer spreading above the surface and resembled Earth's one. Although oxygen was crucial for life, it was not the primary component. It was composed of approximately 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.93% argon, 0.04% carbon dioxide, and minor amounts of neon, helium, methane, krypton, ozone, and hydrogen, and water. Before the global migration of people from the solar system to this area in the universe, no biological life had existed on the planet. The first people adapted well to the environment. Yart people still live in small family groups, each group occupying a specific territory. The groups preserve a unique culture. Membership in each family is based on birthright, common language, cultural obligations, and duties. Relationships within the group determine the categories of responsibility and obligations to the group and the family. The humans built semi-permanent dwellings from local ores, which were smelted using technologies from their home planet, Earth. Special attention was paid to social, religious, and spiritual activities. The environment was controlled by spiritual, not physical means, and religion was deeply connected to the solar system. The first humans overran the planet. They perceived the land as a rich, symbolic, and spiritual landscape, not just a physical environment. The religion was based on a philosophy of unity with the natural environment. Both men and women were involved in the group's spiritual life. The incredibly large number of chemical compounds and the ability of the Yart's flora to change its appearance and properties from contact with completely different chemical elements made this planet a valuable scientific object for the solar system. Under such natural conditions, life was in full swing there. The first people had to survive for several centuries at a great distance from the solar system until they were able to establish at least some order, an order to which all living things are drawn, because only in it can they exist. However, this new world of the Age of Biocrits is a living consciousness that gives life and accepts all living things into itself, and every living creature that resists the rules of the intergalactic order disappears. Silence was in the cockpit. After a short silence, Gartt continued his story about the planet Yart. The team decided to land. The spacecraft landed on one of the islands with trees, wandering among high mountains along which black rivers flowed and fell into dark blue channels between dense forests. In the distance, fields with various vegetation and birds flying overhead were visible. The planet was covered with purple fog. Rays of light plunged into the depths of this fog and, it seemed, could no longer break through the dense veil. But daylight penetrated the viscous mass of air, and not a trace remained of the fog torn to shreds. Circling, at first only in the lowlands, the purple fog, like a blanket, covered the planet, absorbing and softening all the morning sounds. It wasn't even 3 Earth hours before our rescue expedition met with the head of the Yart settlement, Shia. The head of the settlement described his visions and the dreams of his people, Gartt explained. "I saw God, a being that fills the universe, and God spoke to me," Shia began his story. "My voice is an unlikely voice that persists despite a narrative that has diminished my individual and collective being. My being is both individual and part of a network of beings. I am both abnormal and ordinary. My existence has withstood the violent policies and practices that have sustained wars and the colonization of the universe. These policies and practices have shortened the lives of my brothers and sisters, as well as my ancestors. I have lived longer than most people. My ancestors died. Some people escaped and survived to produce offspring, and I am one of them. Some of us lived to continue fighting oppression. Some of us began to oppress others. Most of us lived to do both without realizing it or acknowledging it." "Things were really bad on the planet Yart," one of Gartt's companions responded. "You're right," Gartt replied. "It's no wonder the planet's leadership asked us for help. This settlement again asked for personal contact. The first time of contact is unknown. The planet's population was starving to death." "Many people claim that God speaks when we feel happy and at peace and when we are serving others," continued Shia. "Prayer is a form of conversation with God. Signs of his communication with us are everywhere, if only we have ears to hear and eyes to see. We must be open and attuned to the voice of God, which can come in many forms: a still voice within us, a word from a friend, a verse from Scripture, a dream, or a vision." "The Holy Spirit often prompts us in a soft and subtle way, guiding us along the path that God has set before us," repeated one resident of the Yart settlement. "We may feel a peace or conviction in our hearts, a sense of clarity or direction that we did not have before. All of these are signs that God is speaking to us and leading us in his ways. We must also remember to discern the source of any messages we receive, whether from God or the devil. We can test the spirits by comparing them with the truth of Scripture and seeking wise counsel from the Holy Spirit. The more we seek God and his wisdom, the more attuned we will be to his voice and the more confident we can be in his guidance," whispered the head. "The eye of providence is the all-seeing eye of God." Gartt understood that the population of Yart was dreaming and talking about things they had never seen or heard. Even their visions and dreams were difficult to explain to the scientific minds of the solar system. General Gartt, along with other members of the expedition, began analyzing the situation on the planet. 2 earthly weeks passed. They still did not find any hint of the appearance of hallucinations and conversations with God among the population of the planet. Scientists guessed the memory breakdown, and most people returned to their original state. People were similar to the first settlers. Scientists had inhabited the planet for a long time, but this theory had yet to be tested. The symbol of the Eye of Providence suddenly appeared on the planet Yart and began to be used in religious life. Its image appeared suddenly in many places. The Eye of Providence is depicted as a single realistic eye within one or more additional elements, such as a triangle or a flash of light. The Eye of Providence symbolizes God's watchful eye over all events in the universe, including Yart. One morning, sitting on a hill of red rock, Gartt noticed strange things. He jumped. Aliens. Could they have brought infection to the planet, or are they exposing the population to an extraterrestrial influence unknown to our laboratories? Flashed through his mind. He contacted the main base. What happened? One of the expedition scientists asked. I went quite far from the parking lot of our ship and decided to rest on one of the hills and... Gartt yawned. And accidentally came across aliens. At first, I could not even understand that the beings in front of me were intelligent. But when I saw small metal balls about 50 meters in diameter, which shimmered with all the colors of the rainbow under light, I realized they were aliens, life of extraterrestrial origin. I think that their presence is what causes hallucinations in the local population. In the Age of Biocrits, the word life itself acquired a broader meaning. This definition should not be confused with the specific way of life that exists on Earth. Scientists of the new era used the term beta life to refer to extraterrestrial centers of existence for intelligent biological species and extraterrestrial intelligence. On Earth, life, alpha life, is a network of organometallic chemicals in aqueous solution that records and processes information about the environment in molecular form and achieves dynamic order. Extraterrestrial life can take many forms. Beta life is any hypothetical phenomenon in the universe that corresponds to the understanding of the living state. Beta life maintains its state in various ways, including through thermodynamic reactions that drive growth, development, and expansion in the universe, boundless and immeasurable. General Gartt knew well that the universe is full of unpredictable phenomena, and it is not worth relying solely on scientific theories and existing measuring devices. Nevertheless, traditional definitions of life do not allow us to distinguish between life and non-life. Their vagueness does not allow a person to reach a definite verdict when the differences between concepts of life are large. Helium and radioactivity have their own intelligence and can influence devices designed by Earthlings. Thermonuclear reactions with metals of extraterrestrial origin create radioactive beings capable of thinking. They do not think or cannot think like humans, but they take clear actions against them and any devices that fall on the planets of their existence. These are terrible creatures that take various forms created by thermonuclear reactions. After collecting the necessary samples and conducting the experiments, the scientists informed Gartt of alien life they had accidentally stumbled upon. Unknown fungi and mildew everywhere. Alien intelligent life based on fungi. It has a well-developed intellect. Think and act according to a certain algorithm. That extraterrestrial intelligence, Gartt said. Our scientific facility spends half of all resources on researching and anticipating the extraterrestrial influence of other intelligent beings.
The scientist explained the findings. The life we have discovered is based on fungi. Various species of fungi brought to the planet by aliens cause hallucinations by disrupting the normal metabolic processes by which the brain receives information from sensory input and external stimuli. These substances suppress neurosignals from the senses when the person using them is awake. The person begins to hallucinate.
When this happens, the conscious part of the brain accesses memories. In doing so, the brain relies on recent experiences to compensate for or replace sensory input in the present moment. In the process, the information is mixed. At the same time, the sensation of stimulation seems realistic to the person. Delusions and hallucinations are perceived as reality by the people of Yart. Scans of the area reveal that the aliens were spraying the planet with fungal infections that increased neuroactivity in the human visual cortex and in its limbic system, a region deep within the medial temporal lobe responsible for processing memories and emotions. The prolonged exposure caused depression, anxiety, and social phobia. The aliens attempted to induce an introspective state of consciousness during which the humans had very personally meaningful experiences. Conversations with God. The emotionally charged memories often took the form of visions, similar to those that humans might experience during sleep. The population of Yart experienced a variety of psychological effects. The humans were completely unaware that they were hallucinating. During the hallucination period, the brain areas associated with the sense of self had stronger connections with other regions that control autobiographical memories and emotions. As soon as we received the antidote from the laboratory of the solar system, we handed it over to the leadership of the Yart settlement. The medicine from the solar system reduced the symptoms of depression and hallucinations in the population of Yart. For some people, hallucinations and conversations with God disappeared forever and became a thing of the past. Yart was infinitely grateful for the rescue. Gartt concluded his story. We urgently needed to return home. The spaceship needed repairs and engine replacement. The resource of intergalactic flights was exhausted. All we could do was enter the intergalactic tunnel and return from the planet Yart to the solar system. Sitting in the chief pilot's chair, Gartt would delve into memories and reflections about life in the solar system and its future. In his stories about the planet Yart, General Gartt would reflect on human existence and interstellar expeditions. Yart and Ken watched the starship systems. The spaceship had emerged from hyperspace. The power of flight has inspired humanity since it first saw birds soaring in the sky. Gartt tried to cheer up and entertain the pilots. However, the physics of flight have eluded humanity for millennia. Today, humanity has the technology and mathematical formulas to describe the principles behind this phenomenon, and interstellar travel no longer baffles people. Instead, man is constantly finding new ways to expand the possibilities of flight and has several types of interstellar ships. Each type of starship has its own method of flight and therefore a different mathematical basis, but they all overcome the speed of light and fly through interstellar space.
General Gartt remained seated in the pilot seat, watching the monitoring system. A vital part of deep space exploration is creating systems that have only a small probability of failure and the ability to respond quickly to failures when they do occur. One reason for the high cost of intergalactic missions is the need for multiple levels of verification, testing, inspection, and documentation at every stage, from the production of thousands of tiny components to the assembly into subsystems and systems for both ground-based and space-based vehicles, and most importantly, the organization of human teams capable of imagining and analyzing failure scenarios, designing for them, and finally launching and monitoring intergalactic missions for years or decades to come. The most important problem for interstellar ships is long-duration flights, including long-term periodic phases of operation in the event of unforeseen situations that threaten human life and the spacecraft, added Yart. I've never been the best at coding hyperspace destinations, Gartt smiled, but there was nothing left to do but wait and waste time searching for the necessary information. None of my maps informs us anything about where we are in the universe right now, Yart said. Everything is clear. We have entered a time sea. Huge sources of unstable energy that cannot be seen with the naked eye or detected by simple radar. They are often formed during the complete destruction of a small planet when the energy does not find enough space in a sufficiently solid shell of debris, Gartt explained. The form in which the energy is held is conditional, and there is no mass as such. This is a real sea of energy. It travels chaotically through space, pulling objects into itself.
We managed to get out of the other dimension? Ken asked excitedly. Yes, we are now in a four-dimensional coordinate system, Gartt replied. The general knew that entering the time sea often ended in the destruction of the starship because in addition to avoiding other objects that could damage the hull, one also had to calculate the energy received so it did not deform the ship. The general already had experience with such flights and exits from other dimensions. Suddenly, the alarm triggered. The pilot looked at the screen and saw that a bunch of meteorites were flying straight at them, a new threat. Gartt turned the wheel and the ship circled around the first asteroid. Several times the asteroid still touched the starship, but this did not cause significant damage. The starship was gaining speed and approached the epicenter, where the most chaotic energy was concentrated. The general directed the starship to the place he believed to be this very center, and then, without approaching it, abruptly changed direction and turned on full acceleration. A jump in hyperspace instantly carried it to the other end of the galaxy. The system signaled complete overheating and engine failure. But fortunately, the starship was not far from the solar system. Despite the undisguised surprise of Yart and Ken, Gartt turned on the autopilot and went to rest. After a certain time, the ship completed its journey across the space sea and entered the gravitational zone of Jupiter.